Don't leave your keys in your car. I got an interesting story to tell you. Happened a number of years ago. But I had a real dear friend that came to church, and he had a little bit of learning disabilities. But he was smart. He could do a lot of things. He had the ability to cook. He loved to raise rabbits. He could do his garden. He could carry on a very good conversation. So he just had some shortcomings in his life anyway. But he several times had decided he'd fix some meals for us and several of the guys at the men's meeting, and we had some great meals. He was a great cook, and his granddad was a great cook, and they did it together. But anyway, he decided one night he wanted to fix us all hot dogs. So we went over and sat down to eat and laid out a great meal of hot dogs, homemade, made the chili himself. It was so good, and we were just eating away, eating those hot dogs. And I noticed as I looked around, I could feel sweat running down my face and in my hair. And I looked at the other guys, and sweat was running on their face. And the little old fellow looked up at me and said, "I guess I put too many jalapenos in there," with a just sheepish grin like you wouldn't believe. At any rate, this little fella, he didn't like dead folks. And we left the church one night, and I wanted to go by the funeral home. And instead of running him home, I thought he'd go in with me. And I got there. He said, "I don't want to go in. I don't want to go in. I don't like to go in funeral homes." And there are a lot of folks that don't like going to funeral homes, don't like to touch dead folks. And he was one of those folks. He just absolutely was not going to go in that funeral home. At any rate, he said, "I'll just sit here in the car." And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, if you're going to sit here in the car, I'm just going to leave my keys in the ignition, and I'll be back in just a little bit. I won't stay long. But anyway, I'll go in and I'll visit a little bit and spend some time with the family. And then I'll come back out and I'll finish taking you home. All right, I'll take you home right now." He said, "No, just go ahead and go in. I'll just sit here in the car." Well, anyway, I went in and visited with the folks and shared my condolences and tried to comfort them a little bit. And then I decided, well, it was time to go. Well, there was one of the ladies from the church there, and she was walking out with me. Well, all of a sudden we heard sirens going on. And I'm thinking, oh no, what in the world? All those sirens, they were close by, going right down the road beside us. And man, I got concerned. I really concerned somebody was hurt, and that was all that crossed my mind at the time. Anyway, we got out in the parking lot, and I talked to the lady a little while, and her name was Margaret, and we talked a little bit and shared about the person who had died and the folks who were brokenhearted, and we did all those things for a little while. At any rate, I was getting ready to go back to my car, and I went out through the parking lot, and I couldn't find my car. Man, the first thing that run through my mind is that rascal decided he was going to try to drive. He didn't have a driver's license. As far as I know, he never drove a car. But my car was gone. I'm hearing the sirens, and I'm thinking, that rascal has drove my car and left this place and got in a wreck. So I went back in and got Margaret. She come back out of the car. I said, "If you wouldn't mind, would you take me down and let me make sure Billy's not down in his house? Maybe he's driven the car down and everything's okay, and maybe he's not in a wreck." At any rate, she said, "Okay, I'll take you down there." So she took me down there, and bless my soul, my car wasn't there. I am really getting concerned by this time. And I said, oh my goodness, he's not here, the car's not here. The ambulances are somewhere else, they're further down the road. And I said, that rascal has gone and gotten hurt and driven my car, decided he'd get him a driver's license and go for a ride and do a little joyride. And man, I am getting mighty concerned. I said, take me back to the funeral home. Take me back to the funeral home and let me look again for my car. So we go back to the funeral home, and I'm talking to her, and I said, I am so upset. I don't know what in the world's happened. I'm afraid he's driven off my car. I don't know where he's at. I don't know if he's hurt. I just wish I could find him. So I go walking down and looking for the car again, and there was my car. And he was just sitting there, and I said, you been here the whole time? He said, I've been here the whole time. I said, did you hear those ambulances? He said, yeah, I heard those ambulances. I said, I was afraid that maybe you had driven the car off, because I come out and couldn't find my car, and I thought maybe you had driven the car and gotten hurt. I was scared to death. He said, no, I'm fine. I hadn't left here. I've sat here the whole time. And I got to thinking, for some unknown reason, when we left the church that night, my wife and I, she had driven her one car and I'd driven another, and she said she had somewhere to go, and for some reason she wanted to change cars. I don't know the reason that she changed cars, but I know one thing for certain. I scared me to death, and all of a sudden it hit me. Dummy, She's got your car and you got her car, and Billy's safe. Thank the Lord. You never know what happens. So it's a good thought. Don't leave your keys in your car. I know for a many time when I was working at the shipyard, I'd be racing to get there on time, and I'd jump out of my car and run down to the shipyard and get punched in, and realized I'd left my keys in my car and my doors were locked. And I am frantic. So I tell my boss, and I say, listen, can I go get my keys out of my car? I left them in there, came in too big a hurry, and I need to go back and get my keys out. So I'd get me a clothes hanger, and sure enough, I'd go back and get my keys out and go back and report back to work. I know you've never done anything like that, but the very time that you don't think it'll happen is the very time it will happen. You'll step out of your car, you're in a hurry, and you lock the doors, and your keys are locked inside. I'll never forget my daughter-in-law one time had pulled up in the yard, and we were talking. We carried on the conversation for a pretty good while, and after a while, she got ready to go. Her baby was in the car. It was our first grandson. He was still a little fella at that time, and she went to get in the car, and it was locked and running. And we were afraid, what in the world are we going to do? It is in these times when you get in such dire needs that you do a whole lot of praying, asking God to help you. He has answered prayers so many times. I've been requested that I'll do a thing on prayer, and I'm going to do that because prayer has changed my life. I will share one on that before too long. But anyway, I just wanted to share a little humorous story with you, and I got another I'm going to share in a little short period of time. One leg in the grave and the other on a banana peel, and I've got a story to tell you. I think you'll get a kick out of it. If you enjoy these, if you would pass them on, share it with somebody else, and maybe they'll get a laugh too. My brother's favorite saying was, it's better to laugh than to cry. And as God says in his word, I can't remember exactly how it's quoted right now, but it talks about a merry countenance is good like medicine. Put a smile on your face. I learned a long time ago. I was walking through the stores, and my brother was walking with me. He said, David, when you walk in, look people in the eye and say hey to them, speak to them. And I've made a habit of doing that. We were in a hospital one day, many miles from our home here, probably about an hour away, and people coming in, and I was speaking to them, and my second son, my daughter's husband, looked at me and said, do you know everybody? And I said, I don't know anybody. I'm just speaking. So I made a habit in my life of going down, looking people in the eye and smiling. Some people haven't seen smiles in a long time. Sure, you smile with somebody. You don't know what they're going through. Their world could be turned upside down. So won't you try to help somebody by sharing a smile? Have a great day.